Welcome to episode 64 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about Connor McDavid from the Edmonton Oilers. And obviously, Connor McDavid was drafted back in 2015 by the Oilers first overall. And you look at where he's at now, where his game is at now, and he's become even more dynamic than he was already well known at that age. And that's really impressive to talk about McDavid. And it's really weird that 64 episodes in, we're talking about him. I'm surprised I'm not talking about him earlier, but at the same time, you look at the makeup of his game, and obviously there's a lot of dynamic skill to his game, but what really stands out to me the most is small area handling, speed differential, the ability to take a game over, and the ability to understand playmaking instincts that other players cannot have the ability to do and simply don't. And the processing speed, the cognitive perception of McDavid, the way he thinks the game, how fast he thinks the game, and how fast he's able to interpret sequences that other players miss. It's really remarkable to see the growth of his game and how much stronger he's gotten over. It's hard to believe he's been in the league almost 10 years now, and how well he's continued to get better somehow. Even as a generational talent at that age, he's continued to get better, even more so 10 years after that. And so you look at where McDavid's game is, and obviously he continues to produce, he continues to get better. He continues to produce at an abnormal rate, almost 3 points per game, and he's typically scoring multi-point games. And with him, the overwhelming dynamic skill is really hard for any defenseman to stop. It doesn't matter which defenseman it is, because you're not used to a player with that amount of speed coming at you in so many different waves, with so many different layers in terms of his arsenal and how he can attack. And defenders are so normalized to defend players 1v1 and to match up in certain situations and be able to use their feet in certain ways. But when you're matched up against McDavid, you often see defensemen get their feet tangled a little bit too quickly. And that's one thing I've really noticed a ton of the time. Even elite defensemen, they get their feet tangled, and McDavid's able to beat them clean because they're just simply not ready for his speed. They're not ready for his speed differential. They're not ready for the waves in which he's going to attack. They're not ready in terms of how he's going to attack dynamically off the rush. They're not adapted to that right away because most players don't have that ability. McDavid does, which is abnormal, and he can produce at an abnormally high rate and play at a speed that is abnormal to most players. So defenders simply aren't used to that. So when they see a player coming at them like that, they don't really know how to think sometimes. It's hard for them to actually process the situation because you have Connor McDavid coming at you with blazing speed, with tons of space, and you know he can do almost anything with the puck. And obviously, you don't as a defenseman, you don't want to have the mentality, oh my God, McDavid. I remember there was a clip a few years ago, Alex Pietrangelo, when he was in the Lake Tahoe game going against Nathan MacKinnon. He was like, oh God. That was the quote he had when he was mic'd up. That's not the mentality you want to have against a guy like McDavid. You want to have the mentality of shutting him down. But for most defensemen, they know that's a real challenge, and they're not necessarily going to stop him completely. They have to limit some of his ability to actually stop him. It's like a 60-40 ratio. If you can stop 60% of them, then you can give up the 40. You can give a little leeway there because you don't necessarily have to worry as much when McDavid is not necessarily at his best. But you obviously have to defend to him. You have to stay gapped to him. You have to really interpret where he's going to go. It's really hard for most defensemen to even do that and to match up and to anticipate and really understand the patterning of McDavid. And talk about McDavid specifically, going back to his speed differential, that's what is really separating his ability off the rush in terms of how he's able to dynamically attack off the rush, dynamically attack entries, be able to be a middle lane threat, your interior space threat, being able to maneuver in small areas in the offensive zone. He could do all sorts of different things by being able to maneuver and also understand speed differentials. And he can get going off the hop as well. He can accelerate off the hop. He can turn on a dime. He can pivot into space, and he can pivot under tight pressure and tight circumstances to create space for himself. So with McDavid having these arsenal in terms of his footwork, how he's able to maneuver with his feet, how he's able to pivot, how he's able to create space, and how he's able to create options for himself, that's another factor. It's another big factor because it doesn't matter if he's playing on the perimeter or if he's playing an interior space in the offensive zone. You still know that you're going to get a player who can find a way. He can find a way to get inside. He can find a way to maneuver pressure. He can find a way to escape. He can find a way to escape four guys against the New York Rangers and score on a breakaway, for gosh sake. So that goal, that highlight reel goal I was talking about, and then even the one, I believe it was one of his first, if not his first, against Columbus when he scored that highlight reel goal where he toe dragged, get around the defenseman, he was slightly off balance, and then he maneuvered and scored. That was when one of his first goals. It was either a preseason game or regular season game. I don't remember what year, if it was 2015 or 2016. But anyway, there's a lot of dynamic play and skill that McDavid can create individually, and you don't necessarily see a lot of it. It's really hard to describe McDavid in terms of a separating skill because there's so many separating skills in his game. And everybody knows about McDavid, so it's not really a secret what he does anymore at all. Everybody knows what he can do. Even NHL players know what he can do. Everybody knows. He's always pinpointed in terms of matchups. He's always pinpointed as the guy to shut down. He's always pinpointed as the guy that's going to create. He's always pinpointed as a guy who's going to create a multi-point offensive game. You always know he's going to do something, and it could be NHL analysts, it could be coaches, scouts, whatever it may be. You know you're going to get something out of him every single time he's on the ice, and that pure domination effort is so rare to see. Even to today's game, where today's game is emphasized via small area space, you have forward skating defensemen who understand modern day attributes such as angling, surfing. Defensemen are better skaters nowadays, but a lot of small area skill has really changed the tactical landscape of the game in terms of processing ability, being able to move off the puck. And that's why McDavid really separates himself in this generation alone because of his ability to do those things, his ability to understand how to leverage tactical elements that go beyond the modern day elements and being able to expose those modern day tactics effortlessly. He makes defensemen look like fools sometimes, even when they're skating forwards or they're angling or they're surfing or cutting ice in half, or if they have the right stick position, but they don't necessarily have the speed to match up against him. One player who can arguably shut him down a little bit more if he's more reliant on his defensive play is actually Cale Makar because of he can actually match up to McDavid with feet alone. So that's a player who can actually match up to McDavid's level of speed, which is really, really rare. And you've seen him do it a few times. That's why he's matched up against McDavid. That's why they play him against McDavid. And anyway, McDavid individually, again, it's really hard to find a separating skill when talking about him because there's so much liked about his game. There's so much you can evaluate and take away from in his game. There's so many little details, nuances in footwork, handling, shooting. Actually, more so shooting nowadays than ever, than even his playmaking, because his shootings has continued to get better. His shot has really transformed, and he's become an even better goal scorer. And how he's shooting into space, how he's shooting into pockets on the goalie, how he's able to create windows, his timing element on his one timer and his wrist shot, a lot more timing has gone into the rhythm of his shot and the foundation of his shot. So that could actually be the biggest separating skill for him nowadays more than ever. Now that I think about it, is that actual shot ability. And he's really transformed to more of a shot threat than ever nowadays because you see him score more often. You see him find space. You see him being able to create space as a goal scorer, being able to understand the instincts as a goal scorer in and around the crease and also from afar and from a radius and range of space. So McDavid's shooting elements have continued to get better, and he's continued to evolve as a scorer. As a playmaker, you see the dazzling plays night in and night out. It's no secret there anymore either. You know you're going to get playmaking instincts from him. You know you're going to get a pass for his game consistently. You know you're going to get a guy who's very unselfish when he has the puck. You know you're going to get a guy who's very productive as a passer, being able to find lanes, being able to create space and being able to create optionality as a passer, being able to do so many different things in terms of versatility as a passer. And McDavid's game is so heavily reliant, especially in the early years, is heavily reliant on his playmaking. And now the back half of his career, you've seen more shot ability and shooting ability. So he's become more of a dual threat, which has added to his arsenal and allowed him to continue to dominate even more, which is really intriguing to talk about when you're evaluating McDavid's game and the overall makeup of it.